Hey there folks, Rel here. Today we're going to be offering up some driving tips, both basic as well as the more advanced ones that some veteran players may or may not be aware of just yet. We'll be talking primarily about the Flash and the Harasser, but these tips cross the gap for many vehicles. If you check out the video description, I'll also be posting up more tips submitted by all of you in the comments section. So the first tip is just to drive in third person. There is almost no reason to be in first-person view while you're driving anything but a lightning or main battle tank, and even then, while you're on the move, it's arguable. Being in third person not only gives you more awareness of what's going on around you, but it also gives you turret stabilization, as you will be firing directly at whatever is in the middle of your screen, and your camera will not be bouncing around like it does while you're in first-person view. In the case of a lightning or a main battle tank, your turret will lag slightly behind where you're aiming while in third person if you move it too quickly. So if you're snapping to look in another direction, just wait a moment before firing the cannon. That way you'll ensure the shot goes to where you're pointing. The second tip is to move with the contours of the land, and it's probably the same principle while skateboarding or snowboarding, but you want to orient your vehicle to move with the curves of an object instead of just letting one or two tires snag a corner somewhere. If you're going over a bump, you want to challenge it head on instead of at a weird angle that can flip you over. Likewise, you want to land evenly on the ground instead of at an angle. Both the Harasser and the Flash can roll left and right while in the air by just using the A or D keys or whatever you have your turn keys bound to. So if you're in the air at a slight angle, just rotate yourself so that you land flush with the surface. Another tip is simply to lay off the gas. It's so easy to get spun around when you're trying to make a turn, or you hit a bump, or you're still holding down the forward movement key. You can turn sharper and generally move around more controllably if you just let off the gas for a short period of time, and then you start accelerating again once you've evened out. Most of the time, it's not the lack of high speed that's going to get you killed either in your Harasser or your Flash ATV, it's more often the lack of any speed at all after you spin out and are unable to recover. Or when you spin out just enough to point you in the wrong direction. Controllability is key. To assist you with that controllability, know when to slam the brakes. Braking with your spacebar will allow you to turn a little bit more quickly and will even let you power slide a bit depending on the circumstances. The only thing I can suggest about when to use the brake is just to use it when you're making either a sharp turn from low or zero movement, or when you're trying to recover from a spin-out. Holding down the brake will oftentimes allow you to slow down more quickly, which will in turn allow you to gain more traction upon accelerating again. Aside from that, it's something that you'll have to keep practicing and get a feel for. Know when to use buildings to your advantage as well. I say buildings, but I really mean terrain as well. Let's say that if you want to realign yourself, slamming yourself partly into the wall will force that reorientation as the vehicle smashes up against it. This is especially useful in tighter spaces like towers and buildings. On top of that, barely backing up into a wall as you press your acceleration key will actually jumpstart your forward movement. This is incredibly useful for any ground vehicle, Sunderers and Lightnings especially, but if you're holding the reverse key for too long, to the point where you're still trying to move backwards as you touch the wall, instead of holding forwards as the vehicle drifts backwards into the wall, then you won't get that noticeable benefit of bouncing off. Speaking of acceleration, you can manually shift your vehicle to increase its speed more quickly than you normally would if you were to just hold down the forward key. Here's a side-by-side example, both with the Flash and the Sunderer. I've equipped them both with racer chassis so you can see the difference more easily, but it works with any chassis and probably any vehicle, though I haven't tested it with the Lightning or the main battle tanks. To manually shift, you just tap the forward key instead of holding it down. And there is a rhythm to it, much like shifting an actual car, but that's something that you'll get a feel for once you understand the trick. Still on the topic of acceleration, it's useful to know that your vehicle's traction while moving forward is much greater than if you're holding down the turn key as well. The simplest way to apply this rule is to say that if you're trying to climb a hill, sometimes just holding the forward key and climbing it at an angle will be more powerful than trying to turn and climb it directly. This is important to note on any vehicle, especially Lightnings and main battle tanks, which find themselves sliding down hills a lot of the time while trying to turn and scale them. Likewise, you can also use this traction rule to make harder turns or power slides. If you're already sliding sideways down a hill, say in your Lightning, then just holding the forward key, instead of trying to recover using your turn keys as well, will create a nice sweeping turn that can get you out of harm's way. If you find yourself wanting to get down from a cliff or other high place, make sure that you hit things periodically on the way down. In PlanetSide 2, vehicles explode on landing when they've spent a certain amount of time in the air without touching another object, not necessarily from the damage that they receive from hitting the ground. So even while you're at crown, you can safely make it to the ground if you just tumble all the way down. Whereas, if you were to just drive off the cliff and not touch anything on the way down, you'd explode on contact with the ground. The next tip is just about being nice to your gunner, and that is to say, if you are safe and at range, stop for a moment and let your gunner fire at your target. It's much easier to hit a target while you're stationary than it is to hit one while you're moving, especially if you're using the halberd or other low rate of fire precision weapons. The last two tips I have for you are less about driving and more about staying alive while doing so. The first is that every vehicle in the game, if there is enough room, will force you to exit from the left side of the vehicle. This is useful to know to avoid taking damage while repairing under fire or while parking your Sunderer so that it doesn't drop friendlies off the wrong side of a cliff. The very last tip that I'd like to share is that vehicles in PlanetSide 2 retain their last movement command for just a moment as soon as you exit the vehicle, and you can use this knowledge when it comes to things like repairing. In some tanks, they'll move slowly enough that you can actually make some progress backwards if you hit the reverse key and then exit the vehicle, and you'll still be close enough to repair them while they're moving. It's useful for retreating under fire. But vehicles like harassers or flash units, if you're not careful, you'll end up in a situation like this where the thing runs out of range of you and into the loving arms of an enemy lightning. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about the channel. And this video was pretty quick, and it only really scratched the surface of some of the vehicle-related quirkiness in PlanetSide 2. So if you have any helpful tips that you'd like to share, post them in the comment section down below so everyone can benefit. Thanks very much, folks. We're all signing off.